I'm excited. It is Thursday, January 20th, and this has been a momentous month, I think, for anyone involved in politics and media. And I'm very excited to have Lomez back on the podcast to discuss all the latest happenings. But you are actually back from the dead. What happened since I saw you a couple weeks ago in D.C.?
The deep state. They're attacking me. They're attacking MAGA patriots. Everybody who was back for these inaugurations, like everybody I've talked to got sick or a little bit sick, and there's like a horrible flu virus going around, or they got us with the Havana gun. That's my working theory. But I'm slightly in recovery mode. I have this ongoing, lingering brain fog. So this is my excuse for any stupid thing I say, or if I'm just like sputtering and not making sense, being totally incoherent. It's not my fault. I got hit with the Havana gun. I'm taking methylene blue. That's what all the bros on Twitter are telling me to take to resolve my brain fog.
Oh God!
Have you ever done methylene blue?
I haven't, but it's like a fabric dye. Is that what the original use was?
Yeah. And it like dyes your tongue, and it's supposed to do something like to your neural pathways. I also got this special like mushroom. I'm become in honor of Maha, in honor of RFK's hearings. I'm taking these homeopathic drugs. So I'm taking this like mushroom. It's like 17 different mushroom supplements that's supposed to resolve my brain hangover from this flu. So,
and part of it is just like after 40, you have to really believe in esoteric medical cures.
Yeah.
Because every hangover, every flu, every sniffle becomes like an existential crisis, and you have a lot relying on you. And
yes.
So you got to figure out something. So all right, well,
let
me
know. Also, just
the
like
blue...
natural IQ decline, that's also happening. And I'm just like masking that with these excuses about getting sick.
Yeah, and nootropics.
Yeah.
But this has been, an immense couple weeks. I know that as we were talking leading up to the inauguration, there was this open question of what is it going to be? Is this going to be Trump 1.0 recycled? Is the left going to, kind of riot and blitz through the streets? Is he going to actually take action on all these promises he's made? And I mean, the answer, at least from my perspective, has been an overwhelming, all of the above, yes. Trump, and I watched the planning for this over the last few years with friends that were in the first administration, that have been in Trump's orbit planning for the potential second administration. But it still came as a shock, even though I, in some ways, knew what was coming. How did you see it? I mean, what has been your big takeaway or reaction from the last week?
Yeah, so this has been a period of 10 days since the inauguration of as heightened political energy, focused political energy as I've ever seen in this country, with one exception, and it's this exact same period 8 years ago in 2017. But it was the exact opposite, which is the left activating itself to fight back against literally everything that Trump was doing. And so, if you go back and like just read through the Wikipedia articles about what was happening at this time 8 years ago, there were like protests every day, millions of people in the streets. This is when, the hashtag resistance starts. This is when the Women's March is happening in cities across the country. I looked it up. So the Washington Post, it was February 17th that they unveil, democracy dies in darkness, their big like resistance hashtag, their rebranding, like anti-Trump rebranding. You have the beginnings really of the formal Russiagate scandal. At this point, it was, the 17 agencies signing off, telling us that Russia interfered in our election, which is, of course, like meant to justify all of this leftist energy to neuter anything Trump might do as a political matter. And so what's happened now is like that is gone. That is completely gone. It's completely absent from the discourse. And I'm curious to hear what you think about this. I mean, I sort of saw this coming previously. My hunch was before the election that the left was out of energy, and these activist groups did not have the ability to coordinate or activate their people on the ground who would show up in the freezing cold. They're just out of ideas. Nobody really cares. And I don't want to skip too far ahead, but this is what Curtis Yarvin wrote about in his essay, which is the difference now and why he was wrong and you were right. We'll get into that, is because the left is out of energy. They're lacking this moral energy. I think there's some other stuff going on, and it's not just that the left has deactivated. There's something different in character about this Trump administration. It's the administration of you can just do things, and they're just doing things. But obviously there's been a ton of planning that's gone into this, a ton of foresight. And I don't know, if it's Stephen Miller or who are the people responsible for being ready to seize this moment, but they've obviously been preparing for a long time. And the moment the inauguration happened, they immediately went into action. And this has been something I've never seen on the right. It makes me wonder what Republicans have been doing my entire life up till now. And so, yeah, what's the difference? Like, what do you think the essential difference is between Trump's administration at this point in his inner circle and why they've been so effective in these last 10 days versus 2017?
Yeah, I mean, first, I think you're right on the kind of inversion of political energy, and it's so funny. One of the projects I really worked on, 2 projects since the summer. One was this project of preparing a kind of policy vision and agenda and working with people if there were to be a second Trump administration. But the other smaller project I was working on, I had a patron provide some generous support for hiring a team of ex-CIA and ex-FBI analysts. And they were essentially doing the initial research for some reporting on the left-wing militant groups around D.C. And the thesis from our team essentially was, if there's a contested election, and this contested election spills over into kind of a physical contestation in D.C., riots, conflicts, et cetera, the left has a built-in advantage because the left has an organized kind of protest network. And so we wanted to trace the funding, the organization, the personalities, and the potential force projection of these groups. And we had these guys studying it, and then I did some reporting and had another reporter working on it. And it was this big apparatus that we were able to uncover, and then seemingly it disappeared, it dissipated. They couldn't mobilize anyone. And so it's interesting because you have these formal institutions on the left and organizations and trainings and rhetoric, but they're almost entirely dependent on public energy. And so, yeah, 2016 or 2020, they were able to kind of ride the wave. But when that energy dissipates, it's a totally different story. And on the other side, on the Trump side, I think certainly it's Stephen Miller, amazing. It's a lot of the people at AFPI, the America First Policy Institute, which was chaired by Linda McMahon, now Education Secretary. Yeah. But they had a huge team, and essentially what it was an administration in waiting. And these guys were there doing the detailed planning, policy writing, workshopping ideas. And then, of course, Russ Vaught's group, he's now the director of Office of Management and Budget. He had a group called Center for Renewing America. And his whole focus was, how do we get rid of the woke and weaponized bureaucracy? And so this group of people who were really kind of thrust together in the first term in a totally chaotic manner had a chance to retreat, regroup, start actually planning. And the question among the policy team, up until, right before the inauguration, and I was asking them this because I really wanted to know, was I said, well, what's the likelihood that the president greenlights all of these ideas that you've been coming up with for 4 years? And they said, of course, on background, can't attribute any names. They said, look, the president is an instinctual creature, and we don't even know. We have no idea what he's going to do. But apparently, the president was just like smashing the green button. Just, we're going to do everything. And so I think that's what you're seeing. You're seeing years of preparation, and then the president, I'm sure, given all that he's gone through, says, we're not going to play this time. This is actually a real presidency. There was a almost a feeling like he was even surprised the first time around that he was president.
Yeah.
Now he's not surprised by any measure. The guy's earned it, and he wants to make something out of it.
Yeah, I mean, this is like what you're saying here and describing obviously is playing out in ways that we can see. And like, I'm thinking of the J6 pardons, for example. I remember hearing some anecdote where there was this like back and forth. Okay, who are we going to pardon? And like, what is the threshold for whatever they were accused of doing, whether there was some like violence involved? Maybe they'll stay, but the others will get pardoned. And at some point, Trump is like, forget it. Just forget all of this like nitpicking. Just do the whole thing at once. Like, just pardon all of them. And yeah, okay, some like nuance gets lost in the shuffle there. And this certainly seems to upset, these like liberal centrists who want everything to be so precise. But I'm sort of glad Trump has just said, forget it. Just do everything. Just throw like the entire sink at it and see what sticks. And there's no resistance. There doesn't seem to be much resistance to anything. So I'm wondering, to get back to this research project you were engaged in the summer with these activist networks. One is, I'm curious, why did they just disappear? Was this like, did the Gaza thing really just like split the leftist coalition in half and then they couldn't come together? Is that part of it? Or does like the money dry up? Or is it that the media environment now doesn't have the sort of rhetorical firepower to get like your just average person up into enough of a state of like high dudgeon to get out and, do something in the street? And then my other question to you would be is, okay, this is all great. If I'm being a pessimist, I'm not a pessimist. I'm actually like more optimistic than I've ever been. But if I was being a pessimist, what I would say is, okay, this is all great, but there's going to be a Hawaiian judge. This was like the thing in 2017. Some judge just comes out of nowhere, strikes down whatever Trump wants to do. We saw this a little bit in Seattle with the deportation order. There was some judge in Seattle. So does the Trump team, are they as prepared on the legal side as they have been with these executive orders and this initial thrust to get stuff done? Do you have any insight into that?
Yeah, I don't have particular insight, but I suppose that they are. I mean, the conservative establishment, you and I have critiques of it. But what's really clear is that the conservative legal establishment is strong, it's well organized, it's emboldened. And so they'll have a deep reservoir of talent to draw on. And I think they're going to be much more aggressive. And I think the left, here's my theory of where things might be going. We have this vibe shift, which is undeniable and it's real. The question is it a deeper shift or is it evanescent? Is it something that's going to disappear as the kind of honeymoon wears off? Let's do not the pessimistic, but the most optimistic reading. Is that, no, this is a durable shift. Mm-hmm. And that answers the question of, well, what happens to the kind of left-wing, protest movement? Well, the left-wing protest movement, they need BLM, they need COVID, they need, Trump hysteria V1, they need, the pussy hat era. And when that has exhausted itself, there's nothing they can really gather. And, probably when you and I were young, and, you'd go to like UC Berkeley's campus, you'd go on Telegraph Ave, and you'd see these groups of weird, political radicals with their little red Chairman Mao books or their Lyndon LaRouche tables. And it's like, can we just get the left back to that? Yeah. Where they have so little purchase in the culture that they're like, like smoking spliffs and they're like white dudes with dreadlocks, selling Chairman Mao's little red book on Telegraph Avenue. Like, I'm happy with that. That's a left that I can live with. And it's possible that we could be trending in that direction. It's not inevitable, a million caveats. But they tried, and we had these guys monitoring these groups, and they said, look, they are trying everything they can. They tried to latch on to the kind of anti-Israel, pro-Hamas, pro-Gaza movement. They tried to hybridize that with the BLM movement, and it just never hooked, because the fact is that most people don't care what's happening in the Middle East. I mean, they can get worked up abstractly maybe, but it's not visceral like, a BLM or something. even a Me Too, which people felt like impacted them personally. You can motivate people. And so I don't know. I mean, what do you think? Is this are we being naive and foolish? Are we being over optimistic? What do you
No.
think? Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to make any like long-term predictions, but over the short, medium term, because these things will be cyclical. Like there will be, what you mentioned was like they need something to rally around, and they used to be able to invent the occasion for that kind of activism. So like BLM was just sort of created out of thin air. Okay, there wasn't like we had like the Trayvon case or the Michael Brown case, and then Ferguson blows up, and then you got George Floyd. This stuff was just kind of invented, and in each of those cases, they like tried other flashpoint stories to sort of activate people, and they just didn't take. And I think they're just kind of out of bullets when it comes to those sorts of stories. There isn't then this other kind of exogenous event that they can latch onto, like COVID, for example. The Israel thing is super complicated for them because of how that splits this sort of leftist coalition, and a lot of the Jewish groups that aren't comfortable going along with the Hamas stuff. It's just very uncomfortable for someone, I'm sure, like George Soros to be giving money to people, in opposition to Israel. So that's just turned out to be a total disaster for them. And then, so what are their other causes? Like climate change? Is that really like energizing people? No, we see like they're throwing paint at, these, paintings or whatever, and just being ridiculous. They look totally foolish. There's no organic energy around that. There's no like Occupy Wall Street kind of class-based, event that they can rally around. Maybe there's something in like tech world that they'll find. Maybe AI will be the thing that there's some schism that they can take one side of. But all the stuff they have right now, trans, BLM stuff, all of the criminal reform stuff that they tried to push over the last 4 years is just dead. And nobody cares. Normies do not care about this stuff. Your average like suburbanite, your average person who is not politically active, even if they don't like Trump, is completely sick of this stuff. I think we talked a little bit about that last time, but there's just no energy for any of this stuff. So yeah, I think the left activist class goes into this dormant period for a while. I mean, the other thing here is, and this will dovetail on something else I'm sure we'll talk about, they don't have the cultural cachet that they once did. So even when the left was just complaining on Berkeley campuses, and they were doing like protests against nuclear dumping sites in Nevada or something, that was like their big thing. They at least were making really good music, and they were making like cool movies and writing novels, and they owned utterly the culture. They owned utterly sort of what it meant to be edgy and cool and avant-garde and young and hip and countercultural. They don't own the counterculture anymore. So that other pillar of leftist power is also completely gone. So like, yeah, I'm sitting here talking myself into like, a long-term, conservative ownership. I think what I'd say to that is, okay, what is actually binding us though? Like Trump is not ideological. I tell people this all the time. I'm like, he's not on the right, okay? He's a pragmatist. He's just doing what works. So the question is then not, is the left going to anytime soon aggregate any real cultural or political power? I don't think so. I think that's dormant for a while. The question is, can the right sustain its own sort of self-authorizing movement that doesn't depend on like leftist institutions like academia or the New York Times or New York Magazine for that matter to legitimize what we're doing? Can we just do this stuff and gain status out of it and confer coolness out of it on our own? That's the open question.